Hi, I'm Simon Bestwick, co-host of No Darkness But Us. The second part of our podcast on underwater horror goes up on YouTube and Spotify tomorrow, 1 week later than originally scheduled. For our subscribers, the first part of our deep dive into John Eric Dowdall's As Above, So Below will be available on Friday, again, rather later than intended. My apologies for that, some personal stuff at my end got in the way. To make up for it, and as a bit of a bonus, here's an outtake from the latter episode where Gemma and I discussed a range of subjects, from bizarre sexual practices to cult 1970s British TV programmes, with much else in between. We enjoyed ourselves anyway, even if it had nothing to do with what the podcast was supposed to be about. So I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. I remember seeing something on Twitter where somebody had put, "Do not, for the love of God, Google Criffing," which is, of course, what I immediately did. And I have managed to traumatise at least one fairly well-known gay writer. It is the practice. It is the practice of ejaculating onto a mirror, drying it out, and then basically scraping it off, putting it into powder form, and then snorting it.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not quite sure I understand what the appeal of that is supposed to be, and I'm not quite sure what, the kind of, I mean...
Sometimes I think people just do things because they know they can.
Yeah.
Somebody was like, I wonder if I could do that. And then they found out they could, and they had to tell people.
Yeah, I mean, of course...
was it good? Was it interesting? Well, but you can do it.
The most traumatic, I mean, that wasn't actually particularly traumatic, but there was a meme that went on. I mean, there was we've not long had the shortest reigning prime minister in our history, Liz Truss.
Yes.
Who lasted a total of 4. She was referred to as Liz the Lettuce, because I think somebody put up, like a supermarket lettuce, and said, "We reckon this is going to, its expiry date, it's got like basically a fortnight, and we reckon that it's going to outlast Liz Truss."
My
God. It was like halfway through. It was halfway through her thing. Well, I mean, she managed to completely knacker the economy by I forget what it was she did. Her Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, who was thereafter referred to as Kamikaze, essentially managed to, I can't remember if it was Brexit related or something ridiculous anyway, something that only like a rabid right winger who sort of jacks off to Ayn Rand or something would think would be a good idea. Basically managed to arsefuck the British economy, and it wasn't exactly in a healthy state to begin with.
Exactly.
So thank God she only lasted 40 odd days, because otherwise 3 months of her, and Christ knows what state would be in. But there was a meme that went around, and because she on the same day that she resigned, in the morning she was addressing Parliament and going, "I am a fighter and not a quitter." And
5 minutes later,
that day, "I am resigning." And someone got those 2 screenshots with the subtitles of the TV, and the first one was captioned, "When your goth girlfriend wants to try some kinky stuff, I am a fighter and not a quitter." The next one is, "When she brings up sounding, I am resigning." I had to Google what sounding was. I would have resigned as well. I am usually up for trying.
I would definitely resign.
Yeah, I'm usually up for trying. I'm usually be up for saying, okay, we'll try most things at least once to see if. But no, as somebody said, there was a far easier way to reach my prostate than with larger objects.
It's true. I mean,
nothing is going down there. I'm sorry.
Stop it.
Yeah. So it becomes a sort of thing with me and this other writer. Whereas one of us will find a way to refer to Criffing in the context of a Facebook comment, and the other one will find a way to respond with the reference to the word reference to sounding. As you can imagine, it's much easier to put the word sound into an innocuous.
Yes.
Yeah. Man of sound judgment, or certainly sound like you've etc. Yeah. So I keep wondering if I should Google for some even more, more obscure and depraved practices, but possibly, I mean, I know as a writer, you're kind of used to the idea that there are going to be some pretty weird, there's going to be some very weird shit in your search history, but
yep,
there are limits. you know.
It's true. As opposed to being Stephen King and just like walking next door and going, could a man eat a whole cat, do you think? To the old doctor next door. It's
like, he was able to do a lot of that stuff before they had, before they had Google. So, he was sort of, presumably he just went to the library and, I don't know, or just asked somebody. It's like,
according to him, he kept asking the guy next door who was a doctor. And
that's right, yeah.
He'd come out and the dude would be like doing his lawn or something. He'd be like, okay, so if you had to eat your own foot.
Oh, yes, Survivor type.
Yeah, exactly.
Lady fingers. Like, tastes just like lady fingers.
Lady fingers.
Yeah, God, that is a hell of an ending.
It is. It is.
One writer I have been reading quite a bit of is rereading is Eric Frank Russell. Who did? Sinister Barrier is a great sort of pulpy science fiction action adventure of I think it was originally published by either he mentions with John W. Campbell and Julius Schwartz. Not people we're supposed to say nice things about now, but I know. But it's kind of, in a way, it almost kind of anticipates The Matrix by about
interesting
50 or so years. Yeah, it's not computers, but the idea of this kind of invisible alien race who essentially form as harvesting our emotions or manipulating human society.
Yeah, I remember that. It's called The Tourist, or
the Sinister Barrier. The book's called
The Sinister Barrier. Okay.
He also wrote what are two of the. He had a very dark, sardonic sense of humor. He also had this kind of slightly absurdist thing where he had total contempt for sort of bureaucracy and organizations like the military and so on. But at the same time, he kind of had a touching faith that the human race would somehow manage to muddle through, and the better. Its better aspects would persevere. And Next of Kin is kind of like Next of Kin and Wasp are two wonderfully funny.
Yeah.
So both of them are kind of like in Wasp, the idea is they put this guy on another planet disguised.
That's right, yeah. He's the wasp that causes the car to go off of the cliff.
Just by writing words on a wall or doing these little acts of sabotage or occasional assassinations, but he just manages to convince the aliens there's a huge resistance movement going on this planet when it's just basically him. And Next of Kin, which is kind of like if Wasp is taking this kind of like absurdist approach to James Bond or something or like that, this is like his version of The Great Escape, where a human pilot is kind of like trying to scout out the territories of this alien empire that the Earth's at war with, and he crashes on one of the planets way behind the battle lines, gets taken prisoner by one of the alien species allied with these aliens, not the aliens themselves. So they've never seen a human, and he's the first human that they've taken prisoner. They've got a lot of other aliens, race, the humans, same side as the humans. It's basically the humans and their allies, and this other lot, the Lathians and their allies.
Right.
So he's the only human that these guys have seen, and he manages to convince them that every human has an invisible companion. Useless. He's always he starts talking to himself, basically.
Yeah.
But what happens is he finds ways to take credit. If anything goes catastrophically wrong, then he makes out this is his Eustace. Every human has got a Eustace.
Well done, Eustace.
Exactly, and this is it's like
nice work.
Essentially, by the end of it, the aliens have decided all the aliens and all the other smaller ones are pulling out of this alliance. So it looks like the war's going to be over because they don't want to have to deal with taking loads of human prisoners and having like hundreds of Eustaces on the rampage, creating havoc wherever they go. It's absolutely brilliant and incredibly funny.
That sounds very funny.
And then before those, so after Sinister Barrier, which was his first one, before those, he wrote what I think is it's a brilliant sort of conspiracy theory thriller with a great sense of humour and the absurd, but also it's called Dreadful Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And in it, sort of the human race keeps trying to send rockets to Mars, and the rockets, something always goes wrong with them. They always blow up on the launch pad, or they blow up halfway there.
Right.
And this guy starts trying to figure when one scientist who thinks he might have an answer suddenly drops dead, this other guy starts investigating, and he essentially finds out there's this outfit who believe they are actually descended from the Martians. The idea being that the people of Mercury were all black, the people of Venus were all brown, the natural inhabitants of Earth were all yellow, and the people from Mars were white. It's basically the closer you are to the sun, the darker you are, etc. But the idea being, I know. But the idea is that all these the people of the Mercurians, the Venusians, and the Martians were all much more advanced than Earth, which was much very wild and much more primitive and whatnot. And they were forming. They were sort of rising to incredible heights, except that there was this strain of latent insanity that kept emerging, so creating wars and chaos. So they developed a device that could identify the nutters, and they basically weeded them all out and dumped them on Earth. So that's why, which basically explains, which is basically the explanation for why everything is in such a mess, because most of the population are nutters, essentially.
Nutters and descended from nutters. Nutter descended.
Exactly.
It's nice.
And these people, they call themselves the Normans, short for normal man, as opposed to humoral man or human, which is where the term is supposed to originate. Basically, they're sort of like, well, humanity mustn't reach these outer planets yet because they're not ready. They're still, they haven't bred the insanity out of themselves. They'll catch up eventually, but not now. So the sabotage, and of course the thing is, because people keep sending rockets, it's like, okay, well, we have to start a war. They're manipulating things, creating divisions, creating conflicts to ensure that the human race can't kind of come together and so it's almost like the Tower of Babel kind of thing in a way, I suppose, in that sense.
It is a bit.
And so it becomes this very wacky kind of conspiracy thriller with very kind of hard-boiled dialogue on the one hand, but at the same time, it's actually there's an awful lot of stuff going in there about how easily it is to send people rampaging to do stupid shit. And as the main character points out, the fact that this whole everything the Normans believe may be an absolute load of old bollocks.
Yes.
But the fact that it's got the fact that it has no foundation in reality doesn't necessarily mean a hell of a lot, because they as long as a lot of people, suitably large number of influential people believe it, they'll act as if it's true. So it doesn't. Yes,
really
of course.
Funny.
Yeah, it's a really, and he came with a very good ending to sort of just diffuse the problem in one go. Although when it was first published in book form, the publisher forced him to write this kind of bleak ending where everything goes to hell, which is kind of like the exact, maybe more true to life, but it's the exact opposite of what Russell's stuff tended to be about. But if you get the chance, have a read. It's great fun. It includes as well the hilarious one-liner where after a gunfight, this private detective shouts for his secretary, and someone says, "Nothing doing." She ran out the door. She was historical. Don't you mean hysterical? No, historical. She was saying things about his ancestors.
That's great.
It's terrific. He was he could be an incredibly funny writer. So yeah, definitely check out.
All right.
Check that guy out. I think he wrote horror as well, but
yeah. I've been rereading historical fantasy by Robert E. Howard, and which is also very funny.
Intentionally?
I think yes. I think definitely it is supposed to be intentionally funny in a lot of ways. I'm particularly impressed by the fact that he writes a lot of stuff during the Crusades, where the main character will not be a Frank, you know, and and will be like sitting in the corner going, "Well, Franks are all mad, of course." Yes. This one in particular.
It's always surprised me the number of times you mentioned Lovecraft and people go, "Oh, but Robert E. Howard was a far worse racist." And it's like, have you read either of these guys?
No.
I think possibly it's because people with that's because if you look at some of especially what's he called, Kirby, the Texan sheriff he's in Pigeons from Hell, and he's in Black Canaan. The N word is used it's used very freely. Pretty much as a synonym for what would have been the more acceptable to a lot of us in those days, Negro. But again, I suppose from that place and time, it wasn't that necessarily not everyone was necessarily meant it in a pejorative way, but as a descriptive one. It would still be
I would say absolutely descriptive. That all of that is descriptive, because the thing with Robert E. Howard is that he's super impressed by manly dudes doing manly shit, and of any type of manly dudes doing manly shit. It's like black manly dudes, white manly dudes, brown manly dudes, manly dudes from basically. It's at one point there's a character who this Crazy Frank, I'm sorry, half Gael, half Frank, so like a half Gael, half Norman, so like twice as crazy as usual. God. He ends up in this place called Baya Shaitan, which is like the hole in the wall for Crusader era gangsters from all over the place. And he walks in and sort of looks at the people around him drinking, and they're all people of particular phenotypes. He's describing them absolutely disparagingly. The person he ends up describing the most disparagingly is a guy who's at least half Mongolian and ends up being his only friend.
Yeah.
And walks out the other side with him.
Howard was very good at it, because I think Howard bought into a lot of sort of racialist ideas that were kind of quite close to the mainstream, that were kind of quite fairly mainstream at the time, like the idea of atavism or racial, race memory or racial this or racial that.
But he absolutely wanted to be atavistic. He was like, atavism, it's like the best thing in the world. Man.
He really loved those barbarians like Conan, because they just didn't have neuroses, they didn't mess around. It's like, if you want someone to so you can totally imagine that Howard, he was pretty much the opposite of that in real life. This was kind of how a side of him wanted to be. But I often think it's kind of like, there's this thing of where you do sometimes think he's like, where you think, oh, God bless him, he's doing his best. He's trying sometimes within the limits of a mindset that is, kind of retrograde to us now. But at the same time, somebody like Lovecraft could never have written a character like Nulonga in the Solomon Kane books.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct about that. And also, I came into his historical stuff through Sword Woman. The stories, I think there are about 3 of them that he wrote about a woman named Dark Agnes de la Fere. Who is a female mercenary, and she's just super violent, a super violent lady. It's like, and this particular collection also has the story where he made up Red Sonja, who I did not realize was supposed to be Roxolana's little sister or something like that. So she's very Russian.
Right. I mean, I knew that. I've forgotten that. I mean, I knew that Red Sonja was based on Robert E. Howard's work, but I'd kind of forgotten that. I remember reading it, but I'd kind of forgotten it. I mean, of course, my all I'd really seen of Red Sonja was the Bridget Nielsen film, about which we probably. Not a great version of Red Sonja generally. No woman may have me unless she has beaten me in a fair fight. I did like that bit when they're the first time they're dueling with that little kid. It's like, why is she fighting so hard? She doesn't want to win. But I mean, interestingly, Howard could sometimes play with those kind of with either with his audience's expectations or with what with what they thought he was, what he thought he was going to do. Like there's a story called The Noseless Horror, where there's some kind of there's some kind of critter on the rampage, and you meet one of the characters you encounter early on is this, I think he's a Sikh or a Hindu, and he's got no nose. His nose has been cut off.
Right.
And when the guy he works with has been horribly killed, and this gasps something about the noseless fiend, they say, it's that bloody heathen darky villain. Get away from
that guy over there with no nose.
He's not the guy they have to worry about. It's this monstrous mummy, and he actually saves the white guy's asses in the end. And I love stories like that. I love one, and you get them from that particular vein of writing when there was a lot of stories that were powered by a lot of often quite racist. We've kind of touched on this in Wakefield's Gorge of the Churels.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, kind of that kind of colonial horror, which has often got that kind of weird mix of racism and kind of anti-colonial subversion kind of hardwired into its DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do believe that Howard is coming at it far more from that point of view.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he obviously read a lot of history. He was almost, fetishistic about actually doing research.
And in particular, like reading the bits about, involving huge amounts of battles and destruction. And,
sure, exactly. But there's this amazing line in one of the stories that I read fairly recently where the Turkish guy who is the main character is, talking to his crusader friend, and who explains to him that no, there's no actual place called Frankistan where all the Franks come from. France, where half of his ancestors come from, they came over with the Emir William to conquer the land of England where the rest of his ancestors came from. And he told me then in great detail about the battle that the Normans call Senlac and the Saxons called Hastings. And oh, how I wish I had been there, because gladly did I wish I had been there, because there's nothing so sweet to me as to watch Franks cutting each other's throats. There you go. I love it.
Have you read Louis de Bernier's book, Birds Without Wings?
No, I don't think so.
It's set in the last days of the Ottoman Empire, the last few years of the Ottoman Empire, in this particular village, is one which has a kind of a mixture of Greek and Turkish ethnicities. But of course, the most part they just think of themselves as Ottoman subjects. They don't really, But of course, rapidly something is approaching, which means that people will suddenly be very much pulled apart along those lines. One of the things, the Turkish characters tend to just refer to all Westerners, be they British, French, German, whatever, as Franks.
Yes.
As far as they're concerned, they're all bloody Franks.
Well, you go back to Charlemagne, they basically were all bloody Franks.
Yeah. It's just kind of weird. It's very interesting seeing it from that other kind of end.
Oh, no, it's absolutely fascinating to see it from that point of view. And, to some degree, this is me fucking around like usual. But more and more, I'm feeling that In Red Company is going to have at least a little of that, that Vikings-esque historicity, which is very, very Robert E. Howard. It's very sword and sorcery.
Oh, I can't wait to read that. But I mean, I suppose he does have certain commonalities. There's a fascination for the bloodier aspects of history. There's sort of more slaughterous and genocidal aspects, and there is a bit of a thing for muscly dudes covered in blood.
Yep, muscly dudes covered in blood, and and hot ladies covered in blood.
Yeah. There's probably a little less butt fucking going on in Howard, but then again, if he was around these days, who knows? Who knows? He might have come up with rice petty on his own.
there's a lot more ladies in Red Company than there is guys, but that's mainly because of the plague.
Yeah, that kind of thins out the male part of the
Exactly.
part of the equation.
Yeah, and of course, most of the guys are, churchmen, but that doesn't really mean much at that point. I just wish I could write faster, and I mean, it's weird because it's not like I can't. What
You grind them out.
Yeah.
You grind them out when you. I mean, the weird
when
thing
I
is
have
for
to,
me,
but
I've actually found there's this been weird thing I found where less is more. Because I used to be sort of like you try aiming for like 2,500 words a day.
Mhm.
Now I go for like 1,000 words a day, and that's plenty. And I'm getting more done with that small. I mean, with settling for a small.
Okay, well maybe that's the key, because
Yeah.
but I also just spend a lot of time thinking about things as well, and like writing down a lot of notes and organizing stuff, and it's like more and more it's becoming like a quilt of things. And
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that would go there and that would go there.
I think that's another thing where they're sort of aiming for a smaller, settling for a smaller output. I was somebody was saying even if you do like 500 words a day, that's going to add up over time. You can easily write a book a year, maybe even 2 books a year at that rate.
That's absolutely true. As long as you're not doing other shit at the same time. So, as long as you haven't told this person that you're going to write a short story for them, or that person that you're going to write.
But of course, if you committed to a comparatively small amount of output each day, that does give you more time during the rest of the day to do other things, be it write notes for other books, other ideas you've got. Or I mean,
this sounds so beautifully organized, and
it isn't. It sounds a lot more organised than it is.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, but it is kind of like, if I get up as early as I can and write 1,000 words of draft or whatever, which takes maybe an hour or 2, usually. Like I've got the rest of the day ahead to do whatever the fuck I want, which I can usually figure out at least one vaguely constructive thing to do in that amount of time.
So that's the smartest thing to do, is just get up earlier and make yourself do it.
I slept in the last few days this week. I mean, I've been waking up at like 4:30, 5 in the morning because it's so fucking hot. So it's like, oh well, I might as well get started, kind of thing. Whereas today I actually slept in. I was probably because of all the early morning. I slept in till about 9:30 before I actually sort of like stuck my head out of bed, and then it was. And then I should probably go down and actually eat something before I. Then before I know it, it's gone 11 o'clock. I really had better start writing my. Long story short, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon when I finally finished it, because I kept sort of going, oh, I'll just go and have I'll just check my email.
Yeah, I'll just do that.
Watch an episode of The Big Bang Theory. I'll just
exactly.
See if there's any cool new porn on the internet. That kind of thing.
Oh, yes. Guess what I got a hold of for like $25? The entire Sapphire and Steel on DVD. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I've never seen that, I must admit.
No, neither have I. But Sonia kept telling me that it was really good. And I usually like things that Sonia recommends to me. So
there's quite a bit of old 70s stuff I need to catch up with. I mean, I still got to finish my rewatch of. I've still got all 4 seasons of Blake 7 on DVD.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I started to watch it, and I was like, "Wow, this is different from the way that I remember it."
Well, the special effects are a lot cheaper. The sets are
the special effects are a lot cheaper, but also I think I started like halfway through the 2nd season, maybe.
The first episodes I remembered of it from the 3rd season, so it was actually it was Blake 7 without Blake.
Right. It was just Avon and Dana and the other people.
They had Tarantino, who kind of looked a bit like Blake, but wasn't. I mean, it's when you watch the first couple of seasons and you see that kind of whole tension between Avon and Blake, sort of the one character who's an utter ruthless pragmatist, and the other one who is this crusading idealist. It's almost like that line of between the two of you, you almost make a decent human being, kind of.
That's right. Yeah.
There is that kind of, I mean, I think Paul Dano did say that there's quite a lot of stories where more people die than would have if Blake and company hadn't stuck their oar in, kind of thing. But Paul Darrow was a very, I think sometimes you get this thing where an actor seems to put so much into a performance that it's kind of like it's kind of like they're never quite as good. It's kind of like they've lost something afterwards. It's like Billy Zane. I don't know when he did it, but I've seen him in lots of stuff in more recent years where it's just been kind of like painful to watch. It's like,
it's true.
We know this guy can act. Why isn't he? I
don't know. In terms of Zane, it's like I get the feeling something weird was going on with him. I'm not sure what. Was it drink? Was it drugs? Was it,
That's fucked up a lot of writers over the years.
Yeah,
a lot
who
of
knows?
actors rather over the years.
And writers.
And writers too, yes.
Yeah, but actors in particular, you can sort of see this moment where you go,
oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah, you did something, and I can't quite figure out what it was, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it was with Dada, but I know I've seen him in other stuff where he just performances just didn't have the same sort of energy or depth. His looks went very quickly as well, sort of by the sort of the mid to late 80s. It was a heck of a shock to sort of like, that was Paul Darrow. He'd gone from being this very, very handsome, saturninely handsome young guy to sort of what the fuck?
Well, it always was skin over a skull, so I understand that. That when you lose the fat padding in your cheeks, suddenly it's like, whoa.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what he seemed to put on a bit of padding at first, and then he went very gaunt, and then towards the end of his life, he lost both legs. He had some sort of aneurysm. I think they had to amputate them. And the very last time I saw him, or the very last time I saw a picture of him, it was on some quiz show with Michael Keating, who played Villa, and he was in his wheelchair. Of course, he put on a great deal of weight.
Strangely.
In that time, and again was barely recognizable. But I mean, I often think he would have, if back in the early 80s they'd wanted to go the kind of route with James Bond that they did with Daniel Craig.
True. Yeah.
Quarter century later, they could have done a very good job of it with Darrow in that role. He could have that out. There's an episode in season 3 called Rumors of Death, which really shows the kind of range he could bring to a part. I'm
looking forward to getting to those because I was getting very bogged down, and I think I think I must have stumbled across Blake 7 after Blake because he's just not familiar to me. He's just not, I'm just sort of like, who is that dude?
I mean, in my case, by the time I was probably about 6 when I first saw it. That was when it first. I mean, I might have been around for earlier episodes, but I was just too young to retain any memory of them.
I might have been like 10 or 11, something like that.
Yeah, you can imagine. I was about 7 when that final episode screened, and fucking hell, if you've seen that final episode, that episode is fucking traumatic.
Oh my God. Okay.
I mean, you've not seen it, yes? I take it.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay.
Okay.
It's brutal. It's but people are sort of like saying, it was like somebody said something like, that thing of like the showed the final sort of title card from Quantum Leap. Dr. Sam Beckett never made it. This has got to be the most brutal ending to a TV series ever. And anyone who remembers Blake 7 was just like, oh my sweet summer. They had one of those listicles where it was like the 10 most savage endings to a TV series. It's all American TV. It was all American TV in the last sort of 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, amateurs, come with me to the 1970s and the 80s.
I'm always fascinated by how mean UK TV shows are to their
God, yeah. Well, there was a wonderful, I think it was a fan theory of kind, and I absolutely love this idea, that Blake 7 actually took place in the same universe as Star Trek.
Yeah.
But that Star Trek is like the Federation equivalent of propaganda. This is join the Federation and this is what it's like. And Blake 7 is actually the reality, which is this brutal fascistic thuggery kind of.
Yep. Nice.
I kind of do like that idea, if only to annoy Star Trek fans.
Well, there you go.
I prefer Babylon 5 anyway.
Well, you must be very happy about the animated movie then.
That is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do with. I mean, I know that there were, whenever with quite a few, because quite a few of the original cast, a surprising number of the original cast died off, and I know that certainly as far as doing any other live action stuff set in the B5 universe was concerned, as far as Straczynski was concerned, with once Andreas Katsioulis was gone, Chakar was gone, because nobody could replace him.
Yeah.
But of course they can have him back in a. They can recreate that character. They can. Same with. Him, Via, Stephen First, Dr. Franklin, Jerry Doyle. He kind of a poor man's Bruce Willis, but Sinclair. Zach Henneke off Grease. A surprising number of them have all just popped their clogs. Really is quite shocking. Maybe there is something to the Babylon curse after all. Well, anyway, we were here to discuss
As above, so below.
Yes, on the subject of putting things in holes where they shouldn't have gone in the first place. But
exactly.
Here we go. Okay, I shall clue us in and we shall gab away.
Let's do it.
Hello, good evening, and welcome. No Darkness But Ours is made possible through generous donations from horror enthusiasts just like you. If you'd like to support us, you can sign up to our Patreon and get access to exclusive content, or you can make a one-off donation via Ko-Fi. Links in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the comments, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let us know as well if there's anything you'd really like to hear us talking about in the future, and we'll be back with more next week.